Hey, how you doing? Thanks for downloading the show. Welcome to Garden Fork Radio. It's me and my friends talking about eclectic DIY, hopefully some things we think you would find interesting. Today, it's me and my friend Gabe from the Save It for Parts channel. Hey, sir.
How's it going?
I have no complaints. I'm fine. If I complain, I really can't do anything about it. So,
Yeah.
You've been on the show before, and people really like that. And you're kind of one of them. I watch your videos a lot. I've been watching your back catalog, and it was fun that you had time to come back on the show. So thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I try to keep up on your podcasts, but I have to admit I don't always have time for podcasts, so I'm not up on all the latest ones.
Well, you've got a lot going on there. I mean, you have a full-time job, and then you're cranking out so many videos, which is fun. And what I like is they're not polished. The end isn't always a success. It's just you trying to figure something out, and I really, really like that.
Yeah, I've told people before it's kind of an excuse for me to use some of my hoarding and do the projects that I want to do, but give myself an incentive to either get them finished or started, or at least at least get out there and do something in the garage, something with some of my stuff, rather than just watching TV all day.
Which I could do. So a couple of viewers asked about a couple of the video themes in particular. I have a couple friends who have jet boats. They're slightly different than the one you have, but I kind of happened upon the videos are from a couple of years ago, I think. But you've got a boat.
Yeah, I have several boats at the moment, and I have owned several boats. I think I mentioned maybe in the last podcast, I grew up in Alaska on an island, so I'm, kind of a boater at heart, and can't have any really huge ones here. I live in Minnesota right now, so I can't have a 40-foot fishing boat, but I've got I think it's like a 16-foot. It's actually a little cabin cruiser, a jet boat. It's a 1960s Dorset Catalina, and I bought this used, as with most of my stuff. The prior owner had put a V8 engine in it and a jet drive. Normally, these boats would have like an outboard or something a little more restrained than a V8, but this one has a V8 engine in it.
It's a big engine.
Yeah, it's the biggest engine I've had, I think, including road vehicles, and definitely goes through gas very quickly when it runs, but of course it's a boat, so it doesn't always run.
So that it's because I grew up, I was much younger in that era, but I looked at that engine and I'm like, I was raised on that kind of thing. And I'm like, it's this giant engine it's not a small boat, but it's a smaller boat. And it's called a jet drive. And the jet drives I know of are from jet skis. And yet this is different.
Yeah, and I'm not super familiar with jet drives myself. I grew up on outboard motors and inboard diesel engines, but it's essentially a water pump with an inlet on the bottom of the boat and then just a nozzle on the back. And so I think similar to a jet ski, but basically the drive shaft from the engine goes straight into this pump, and there's no transmission. There's no real... it's very simple. It's basically just the more throttle you give it, the more water it pushes out, and the faster you go.
Well, simple is good on a boat because it's less thing to break,
Right. And even I say it's simple, but then of course there's all the auxiliary systems, there's all the extra parts of the engine and the gauges and the electrical system. And I like to joke that the prior owner had a religious conviction against lengths of wire more than 6 inches long. So if you go from the engine up to the dashboard, you go through about 18 different colors of wire. And,
oh, wow.
You're going to be lucky if you can get any of the electrical to work.
We live in an apartment in an older building, and every time I open up the wall, I expect to find extension cords because that was a thing back in the 70s and 80s here. So similar yet different. I also liked one of the episodes. The engine went out, and you consulted an expert who hit the starter motor with a 2x4.
Right. Yeah, I had to talk to a a V8 expert from the 70s, and that was the recommended fix. And I've since taken the starter out, and I took it over to a rebuild shop. They were able to rebuild that, redo the windings. Yeah, oddly enough, it's really hard to find information on some of the parts for this. It's something that, probably anybody at a repair shop, any petrol head type of guy knows what these are. But if I, as a younger fellow, go online and look up a starter for a Chevy 350, it's like there's nothing out there. It's like I'm too young to know what these things are. So it's really hard to find parts for it.
Yeah, I never rebuilt a V8. I rebuilt couple four cylinders and a straight six and a bunch of Volkswagen engines, which is that Boxster style, the kind of Porsche engine
Oh, okay.
style. Those things are so modular, and there's maybe three wires.
Sure.
Was the jet boat, it being a jet boat, an attraction, or?
To some extent, yeah. I like kind of odd things. I like unique vehicles, which becomes a problem. Like I said, when I go to try to repair it, if it's different than everybody else's vehicle, it can be a hassle. But it looked different. The motor was different. I had just gotten rid of another little speedboat that I had with an outboard, and I just fought that outboard for 2 years on that one, and I ended up trading it to another fellow who I think got rid of the outboard. So it seemed a little nicer to have something large, inboard, kind of accessible from all sides versus an outboard. You have to kind of disassemble the whole thing to work on it, and they're a little more of a hassle. I like them, but
They are.
can be a hassle.
For people that might not know, an inboard engine is an engine that sits inside the boat, and there's a drive shaft going through the back of the boat with a propeller. And an outboard is probably what a lot of you have seen if you've seen people going fishing, like on a bass boat. It's a complete engine that hangs off the back of the boat. The beauty of the outboard is if the engine breaks, you can just go buy a new outboard motor and clamp it on. If
Right.
the inboard motor breaks, your boat is toast until the motor is fixed or replaced.
Yeah, so there's definitely pros and cons of each one, and I try to have an auxiliary motor of some sort on most of my larger boats, just in case it goes out. This one I've got a slightly larger electric trolling motor, and we did use it at least once. I have this problem with the jet drive. It's plus side and negative side as you can get really shallow. You can go basically in as much water as the boat will float in. You don't
Mhm.
have a propeller hanging down. But if you do get too shallow, you tend to suck things up like mud and weeds, and because it's this giant water pump. And I have on several occasions plugged it with weeds, plugged it with mud. We were limping back to the launch ramp on the electric trolling motor because we couldn't get it started again. And the sheriff boat came by and kind of took pity on us and towed us back, even though we didn't need it. But we said, fine, if you got nothing else to do, you can tow us home. So
If people are thinking about getting a boat like that, do you have any helpful hints?
Well, one like this, I would say, is probably not a starter boat. You probably want some experience with boats, smaller boats first. They're always expensive. There is always something broken. There is always something that will break when you're out on the water. So you kind of have to expect all of the worst things to happen and prepare for them. And then if and when they do happen, hopefully you've got an extra drain plug or an auxiliary motor or some paddles or your throwable flotation device, all that stuff. So, so yeah, definitely be expecting to either spend a lot of your own time and money or have a shop or a friend who knows how to work on these things, who is willing to spend a lot of their time on it, because even a brand new boat is going to have a lot of maintenance associated with it.
Wow. Have you ever done sailboats?
I have, yeah. When I lived back in Alaska, I actually had a 24-foot. It was a Bayliner Buccaneer, which.
Oh, I know a Bayliner. I know that boat.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Bayliner mostly made these little speedboats, but for a while they made sailboats, and they were kind of an oddity. They were the family minivan of sailboats, so very slow, very inefficient, but great. Lots of space inside, so you could sleep like six people in this boat. You could stand up, as a 6 foot tall person, I could stand up inside it, which is really nice for a relatively small sailboat. And I believe that's still afloat. I got it free. It was sinking at the dock. I fixed it up. And when I've been back in Juneau, I've seen it at the dock, but I've also seen it on the people don't pay their slip fee, and so every couple of years it comes up at a city auction. So I
Oh,
think it's changed hands a few times since I owned it.
yeah, I have not seen any of the cars I've stole. I gave away a canoe that had a big hole in it. The tree
Oh, okay.
a tree limb. There's a bunch of pines around my house upstate, and a tree limb just missiled right through the. It was a Old Town boat, and my friend was like, "I'll take that boat." I'm like, "It's a
Sure.
canoe," and I'm like, "Here," and I think he used Bondo, and just now his kids paddle it around the pond. So that's,
Oh, okay.
and I'm like, why didn't I think of that? But then I bought another canoe that was much lighter. That some of those beginning Old Towns are really heavy.
Yeah, and some of them, if they're old enough, the early plastics are they get brittle in the sun. I definitely had one when I moved to Minnesota. Here, I found a cheap canoe, and I we used it 2 or 3 times. But if you nudged a rock, it would just shatter. And yeah, I'd replace it with fiberglass, and it would just shatter again. And we eventually just gave up on it. But yeah, if you have a fiberglass boat, they can be repaired. Uh, but yeah, there's ways to fix them if they've got a big hole in it.
Well, I kind of want one, but I don't. It just sounds like it's going to take up a lot of my time, so I might wait on that.
Well, this is like you said, I got that jet boat a couple years ago. Last year, we didn't have it out at all, and this year I keep saying I'm going to get it out on the water. Currently, the jet drive itself is all taken apart, is out of the boat, and half of it is over at a friend's house who has a bigger shop than I do, and he's having to fabricate a special tool to get the drive shaft out because
Oh
it's more
wow.
than I'm capable of doing. But he's basically welding up his own impact wrench to get this drive shaft out so we can rebuild it. And the prior owner also had a religious conviction against torque specifications and lubrication. So there were definitely some big gouges into that drive shaft, and we're trying to get that replaced.
Is there? You also said in one of the videos that the seal was leaking in the drive shaft. Is that a fixable thing? You think, or?
Yeah, the seal itself can be replaced, and I actually replaced that last year, or yeah, last year, the year before. It's been a while, so I lose track. But yeah, it's basically just a little O-ring that keeps the oil in place. It's kind of like your on your vehicle if you had a transaxle or a differential. It'd be a similar oil. Um, but because it had run without lubrication and because it had run kind of not torqued down correctly, the drive shaft had rubbed in one spot and cut these grooves into it. And so even with new O-rings, it won't hold a seal. The oil
Oh,
just comes out and it just gets worse.
oops.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, one easy way to support Garden Fork is if you're going to shop online and use Amazon, please use the link to our storefront. The link is in the show notes here. If you click on that, it'll open it up in your web browser. If you're on a laptop or desktop, it will open it up into your app, ideally if you're using the Amazon mobile app. Please shop locally. I go to my local hardware store first. If I can't find it there, then I go to the orange or blue store. If I can't find it there, then I order it online. So if you are shopping online, use our Amazon link, amazon.com/shop/gardenfork. The link is also in the show notes. Thank you. Well, could we segue to something else aquatic? I've really liked the videos where you're talking about the pond in your yard, and
Sure.
that seems like a success to me.
Yeah, that's been fun. It was a DIY project. We dug the hole ourselves. We put it's kind of a hybrid system. The bottom half is this plastic stock tank, and then it's got a rubberized pond liner over the top. So to some extent, it's a double bottom. If it leaks, it will only leak so much, and it won't lose all the water. And then we made it deep enough so we could overwinter goldfish in it. In Minnesota, you have to be over 3 feet to be below the frost line.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that's been pretty successful. We took some little 10-cent goldfish from the pet store, threw them in there, and they looked like these just half-inch fish when I got them, and now they're these beautiful, almost koi like goldfish, and they're really pretty. And we've got snails in there and aquatic plants, and the local birds really love it. It's a great way to see all the local songbirds in your area to have water in your yard.
So did you dig down 3 feet by hand then?
We did, and we chose the spot that was apparently the ruins of an 1800s house that was on this property, long before our house. So ended up finding this limestone foundation that we had to smash through, finding all kinds of interesting artifacts, bullet casings, knives, all kinds of weird stuff in this ruined foundation. But yeah, that definitely made it harder to dig through because there were these chunks of limestone in there.
And then you put in the plastic, the rigid plastic, and then was it like is it called the EPDM liner? Is it rubber liner?
That sounds right. Yeah, it's a very thick rubber liner, and then yeah, it's kind of challenging to get it to not have folds and overlaps, which look a little ugly. But if you're careful, you can hide those or put rocks around them. And then again, we I like to make things hard for myself. We did a secondary pond, which is a swamp, so it's mostly full of kind of dirt and gravel. And the water from the main pond gets pumped up through that swamp, percolates up through it, and then filters back out through a little canal system. And that's just an all-natural filter. It's called a bog filter, so you don't have to replace any filter elements. You don't have to use any chemicals. That cleans out all the fish poop and kind of feeds the plants that are in that bog pond. So there's cattails and other stuff in there that live off the nutrients that are being filtered out.
I've seen some articles and videos about city sewer systems using big concrete ponds of cattails to purify water.
I'm not completely familiar with that myself. I know our water system in St. Paul originally comes from the Mississippi River and gets piped into a series of lakes, and then settles out in these lakes, which have wildlife and wild plants, and then it goes through the treatment plant with the chlorine and all that. So I guess we're using something similar to that, but it's a natural lake system versus concrete.
So how did you start? Did you just know this from a previous project, or where'd you start with?
With the pond, you mean?
Yeah.
I looked up a lot of stuff online, did some research, and everybody has different opinions on how to do it. So it can be hard to find the exact way, but there's a lot of information out there about bog filters, swamp filters. We kind of made up the thing with the stock tank. We just figured, hey, we don't 100% trust this rubber liner with all this kind of limestone and trash that's in the hole. So let's give it a more rigid bottom just in case. And then kind of, I made up the plumbing myself, which has come back to bite me a bit. There's kind of ongoing leaks in some of the plumbing, some of the underground piping. I had originally put heat tape on all of my underground pipes to keep everything from freezing, but something still leaked or froze, so we've had to redo that a couple times. The pond itself stays fine. We just turn off the filter in the winter. The fish kind of all don't go down and sleep at the bottom, essentially, and they're not really active enough to require filtering. Other than we have like a heater that floats at the surface and just keeps an air hole open for gas exchange, and that seems to be enough for goldfish. If we had fancier fish, maybe they'd need more than that, but goldfish, it seems like, will survive just about anything.
Do you have to have the bog filter? If you didn't have the bog filter, would you have to have like some sort of box that the pond water goes through to filter it?
Yeah, probably so. So I guess the other filter I've made in the past, we have some ducks and a goose as well, and they make water dirty, faster than anything, basically. So that filter is more of a traditional membrane stuff in it. It's a barrel. The water from the duck pond gets pumped through this barrel, goes up through, I think it's a layer of like pumice rock, and then a layer of this fiberglass mat, and then there's different layers of stuff, and every so often I have to clean those things out. But we do have some plants growing in the top of that, and they do keep the algae down and use up some of the nutrients that the ducks are generating. So I guess that'd be a hybrid filter system where it's partly mechanical filtration and partly biological filtration.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you have ducks and geese.
Yeah, one goose at the moment, two ducks. We had some more previously, but some of them have passed away, and they're pretty old at this point. They don't lay eggs anymore. When they were younger, they laid a lot of eggs, and we'd get duck eggs, but they're just pets at the moment.
Do they like interact with you or know who you are or?
Oh yeah, the goose hates me. My partner Rachel, the goose loves her, and she can pet it and hang out, but I get bit every time I try to feed them. So
Oh,
they definitely
jeez.
have favorite people, and they'll call when she pulls in when she comes home from work. They know her car, so that's kind of cool.
Oh, that's fun. Do you? I guess I think most of your yard is fenced, so they're within the fenced yard.
Yeah, and they're not really a flying breed of bird. They're like bred for meat traditionally, so they're pretty fat, pretty large bodied birds, and they can jump a few feet if they really try, really flap hard. But yeah, just a short fence is enough to keep them contained.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, that's my sister had a duck when we were growing up, though.
Oh,
That's
okay.
all I remember.
Yeah, they're fun. We had some when I was a kid in Alaska, and they would just dabble around in the ocean in the tide kind of tide water, and the eggs always tasted a little fishy. So when I was a kid, I didn't really appreciate the duck eggs, but here they just eat like a pelletized feed, and they taste mostly like chicken eggs, so they're pretty good.
Oh, nice. Well, before we end, what's in the can or what's coming up as far as the show and your projects?
Oh gosh, lots of stuff. I'm trying to get some more boat projects done before the summer gets away from me, which always comes too fast. I've
Yeah,
got a
surprise.
train. Yeah, I've got a train vehicle. It's a pump car for abandoned railroads. I've done one video on that, and I have some improvements to do to it. So that'll be probably a recent, near future video. Um, let's see. I've got some sort of satellite radio experiments that seems to have gotten really popular lately on YouTube. So I'm trying to do more of those. And then yeah, just whatever junk I have in the garage that I either get tired of looking at or get a whim to turn into something else, basically.
I love it. It's the satellite stuff I'm amazed by, and because I didn't realize you could just some of these things aren't encrypted. You're like just point it at it and download a picture of the weather.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff out there that's free, but kind of obscure enough that not everybody knows about it. There's a lot of government satellites that yeah anybody can tune into for if you're out in the middle of nowhere, if you're on a ship, it's a great resource. And yeah, and then really cool for just experimenters and amateurs to poke at too.
Yikes. Well, cool. Well, everyone, if you want to see more of Gabe, his YouTube channel is called Save It for Parts, and he has a whole series on the jet boat, which is a lot of fun to watch. And there's just I like the sense of humor going on there. Gabe and I are going to stick around for an after show for the Garden Fork patrons. If you're interested in getting more of my world, I post some photos every couple of days, sometimes every day, sometimes a video. It comes up on an app you get, or you can get all this kind of stuff emailed. The information for that is below. Gabe and I are going to stick around. But otherwise, thank you, sir, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Garden Fork Radio is produced by Garden Fork Media LLC in Brooklyn, New York. Our executive producer is Jimmy Goose. For more information about Jimmy and the custom hollow books he makes, visit hollowbooks.com. The music in the show is licensed from audioblocks.com and uniquetracks.com.